True Lies was an action comedic blockbuster that made waves in the late 90s. With an amazing main actor like Arnold Schwarzenegger, a director, scriptwriter, and producer like James Cameron, and a record-breaking budget of $100 million, it is no wonder that the movie was a huge success. It was the first action movie to blend global espionage, marital drama, and comedy. However, as captivating as it was, the movie has some behind-the-scenes weird facts unknown to many. Join us as we reveal 20 of them. True Lies was #1 at the box office for just a week. Despite its massive budget, star power, and James Cameron's impressive records, True Lies did not dominate the box office for as long as some people claim. The movie debuted as #1 during its opening weekend from the 15th to the 17th of July, 1994, pulling in a strong $25,900,000. Its reign at the top sadly did not last for long. 1 week later, it was overtaken by The Mask, a movie starring Jim Carrey, which opened with a similar $23 million, but maintained a stronger momentum. The summer of 1994 was competitive as it saw the release of several other movies like Forrest Gump, Speed, and even The Lion King. Yet, True Lies was able to gross over $146 million domestically and more than $378 million worldwide. Despite not being at the #1 spot on the box office for long, it was still one of the highest-grossing movies and proved itself as a commercial success. Bill Paxton improvised most of his lines. In True Lies, Bill Paxton plays the role of Simon. While his character is relatively minor, his performance is unforgettable because he improvised most of his lines. According to the cast and crew, director James Cameron gave Paxton wide creative freedom to explore the role. To this, many of Simon's most hilariously pathetic and over-the-top lines were not in the script at all but were from Paxton's imagination. His desperate tone, physical expressions, and comedic timing helped turn Simon into an unexpected iconic part of the movie. Even Arnold Schwarzenegger later commented that working with Paxton on those scenes was difficult because he had to try to keep himself from laughing too much. James Cameron edited the final cut himself. James Cameron is renowned for directing epic blockbusters and being intensely involved in every aspect of production. To this expertise, True Lies was no exception. He even edited the final cut of the movie himself. Rather than leave the process to a post-production team, he spent extensive time in the editing bay, shaping every sequence to fit his vision. This is part of what gives True Lies its tightly choreographed blend of action, comedy, and emotion. Even more revealing was how his editorial control affected the film's opening credits, which were a highly political and symbolic part of any major release. Jamie would later reveal that contractually, Schwarzenegger was supposed to get top billing, followed by the film's title. However, after finishing the edit, Cameron realized that the story wasn't just about espionage or action, but was, in his words, a domestic epic, a film about a marriage. As if lit up by the realization, Cameron called Schwarzenegger and asked for permission to place Jamie Lee Curtis's name before the title. That singular act was a rare and meaningful gesture in Hollywood's credit hierarchy. Curtis later admitted that the credit, if such a coveted, negotiable commodity, that was a real mensch move on his part. Cameron's role as an editor did not just involve his polishing of the movie. It also involved him redefining how its story and stars were presented to the world. The shower scene nearly got the movie an NC-17 rating. One really weird fact about True Lies is that the movie was almost slapped with an NC-17 rating. It is even more surprising because it wasn't due to the explosions or body count, but rather because of the infamous shower scene, which featured Jamie Lee Curtis. In the film, Helen Tasker, the role played by Jamie Lee Curtis, was caught in a tangled web of deception, romance, and espionage. One memorable scene involves her preparing for what she believes is a spy assignment, resulting in a striptease performance for a mysterious man who turns out to be her husband, Harry, in disguise. While the striptease scene is known, an earlier shower scene almost pushed the Motion Picture Association of America to give the movie an NC rating. According to Cameron, they almost flagged it as an NC-17 rating because of how sensual the shower sequence was. Even though no actual nudity was shown, the suggestive nature of the scene made the rating board members uncomfortable. Cameron and his team had to re-edit the scene to tone it down. They also trimmed the length and cut specific shots to make it less provocative. Eventually, their efforts paid off, and they secured an R rating instead. Tia Carrere's character was based on a real spy. Tia Carrere played the role of a sultry and manipulative art dealer named Juno Skinner. In the movie, she secretly collaborated with terrorists while masquerading as a legitimate businesswoman, adding a seductive and treacherous element to the movie's complex plot. However, what most fans do not realize is that Junior Skinner wasn't entirely a fictional character. According to James Cameron, the character was loosely inspired by real-life spies, particularly the women in intelligence who have used charm, manipulation, and subterfuge to gain access to secrets or indirectly influence targets. The Juno character wasn't based on one specific person but on multiple case studies and spy biographies. He wanted to avoid creating a cliched villain, and to achieve this, Carrere herself had to study such figures to bring authenticity to her performance, blending both glamour and menace in equal proportion. The character Juno remains one of the most stylish yet most dangerous antagonists. The CIA once investigated the movie. True Lies drew the attention of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, during its development. According to multiple reports, during the pre-production process, the director, James Cameron, and his team consulted with former intelligence operatives and military experts to lend authenticity to the film's espionage elements. It was here that some of the information, especially regarding covert operations, surveillance tactics, and counter-terrorism protocols, was gathered. It was so specific and accurate that it allegedly triggered curiosity from the CIA. At one point, some rumors suggested that the agency quietly investigated how Cameron's team obtained certain details. The accuracy of the information they had received sparked concerns that classified information might also have been unintentionally leaked to Hollywood. Ultimately, no wrongdoing was found and no official action was taken. However, the fact that a fictional action comedy caused such troubles in the intelligence community only helped to solidify True Lies' reputation as a well-grounded movie. It also revealed Cameron's thorough research and commitment to realism that even the CIA noticed. Jamie Lee Curtis performed the helicopter rescue stunt by herself on her 35th birthday. Just as with most cast of True Lies, Jamie Lee Curtis immersed herself in her role and threw herself right into the action. One of the most memorable moments is toward the end, where Helen Tasker dangles from a helicopter as her husband, Harry, holds on to her for dear life. Most fans would have expected that scene to be performed by a stunt double. However, it was Jamie Lee Curtis herself who had handled the dangerous aerial work. Hundreds of feet in the air, that wasn't all. She acted out that scene on her 35th birthday. When the director, Cameron, pitched the idea to her, her response was to look him in the eye and ask, "Oh yeah? And just where are you going to be while I'm dangling way up there in the air, Jim?" To this, Cameron's reply was simple: "Hanging out the door, filming you with a handheld camera." That was it. Curtis agreed to do the stunt, and with a safety rigging and a helicopter hovering over the Florida Keys, she was hoisted into the sky, while Cameron did exactly what he told her he would, filming, trusting in the team's precision and each other's nerves. Later on, in a behind-the-scenes special promotion of the movie, Curtis described the experience as one of the most exhilarating of her life. There was no green screen or backup double, just a woman making the most daring decision of her life on her birthday. The most challenging part of the movie for Arnold Schwarzenegger was not the stunts, it was tango. In a surprising twist of fate, Schwarzenegger admitted that the most difficult scene in the film was not hanging from helicopters or galloping through a hotel. For him, it was performing that ballroom dance with Jamie Lee Curtis in the movie's opening sequence. Determined to make the moment believable, he committed himself to taking tango lessons for 6 months. Here, he practiced tirelessly to capture the sophistication and rhythm needed for the dance. He did not just want to get it right. He wanted it to come naturally and easily to him. Director James Cameron later praised his dedication to the scene, stating that most people would not have expected it from him. He continued by saying Arnold had worked hard on the dance, just as he had done on every stunt. In a movie packed with physical feats, the tango stood out as the most demanding for the action icon, Arnold Schwarzenegger. While it is ironic that the easiest task for every other person would be the hardest for the star, he brought the same level of dedication to the scene as everyone else, and further proved that he was worthy of being cast for the role. Arnold Schwarzenegger nearly died while filming the horse scene. During the filming of one of True Lie's most memorable sequences, where Harry Tasker chases a motorcycle through a hotel lobby on horseback, Arnold Schwarzenegger had a genuinely terrifying brush with death. While preparing for the rooftop chase scene, the horse was standing on a high-rise structure in downtown Miami. Unfortunately, a large camera boom unexpectedly swung too close to the horse. This agitated it as it came up in panic and bolted dangerously close to the edge of the building, where there was a 30-foot drop-off. At this time, Schwarzenegger was still on the saddle but soon managed to slide off the panicking horse. He, however, was so close to the drop. It took the intervention of his stunt double, who lunged in and grabbed Schwarzenegger to save him from the disastrous fall. Although this part was never included in the movie, it remains one of the most terrifying incidents Arnold has ever been involved in during his career. Although it received an Oscar nomination, it lost. For a movie so carefully detailed with that amount of money, time, nuclear warheads, exploding bridges, a limo flying off a causeway, and the Harrier jet dangling over Miami, it is no surprise that True Lies caught the attention of the Academy Awards. In 1995, the film's visual effects team, which consisted of John Bruno, Thomas L. Fisher, Jacques Stroheis, and Patrick McClung, earned an Oscar nomination for Best Visual Effects. It was a well-deserved recognition, especially after orchestrating one of the most technically ambitious action movies of the 90s. Every explosion, high-speed chase, or Harrier stunt pushed the boundaries of practical and digital effects at the time. However, they lost the honor of the award. That year, that category went to Forrest Gump, a very different kind of technical marvel. However, even though they had lost the award, the nomination alone was enough proof that True Lies was not just for amusement. Even though it did not win the award, it has had a lasting impact on cinema to this date. The sequel was planned until it was killed by 9/11. A sequel was the next logical option for a movie that had garnered attention the way True Lies did. The cast was ready, James Cameron was spinning with ideas, and even Tom Arnold said the script for True Lies 2 was better than the first. Everyone was expectant. All of a sudden, the dream came crashing down. In the early 2000s, a follow-up was seriously being developed with Schwarzenegger, and Curtis set to return as a husband and wife spy duo, now working missions together. According to interviews granted, the second part was to lean deeper into comedy and espionage. All of that came to a halt on the 11th of September 2001. The 11 attacks did not just shake the world, they completely redefined terrorism and how it was viewed in the media. True Lies, for all its action, had used Arab terrorist caricatures for laughs and thrills. However, right after 9/11, James Cameron knew that the tone of terrorism would no longer be accepted. In an interview, Cameron made it clear that terrorism was no longer something that could be treated lightly. In his words, "It is no longer appropriate. The world changed." Jamie Lee Curtis also shared a similar opinion, saying, "We can't ever go back to being lighthearted about terrorists." The project did not have an official announcement before it was called off. It just slowly faded out of the conversation. By 2003, when Schwarzenegger became governor, whatever hope of its resuscitation that was left quietly slipped away. By 2023, though, the idea of a sequel to True Lies was reawakened. This time, though, as a network television show and throughout its one-season run, the movie seemed to have lost its magic. Critics hovered while fans deliberately ignored it. Unfortunately, True Lies 2 was never born, not because it wasn't wanted, but because history intervened and some jokes are never quite the same after going through a horrendous experience. The film sparked controversy over its portrayal of Arabs and Muslims. The movie did not sit well with everyone, especially the Arab American and Muslim communities. Almost immediately after its release in 1994, the movie was criticized for reinforcing harmful stereotypes, portraying Middle Eastern characters almost exclusively as terrorists or as violent extremists. At the center of the criticism was the fictional terrorist group Crimson Jihad, led by Art Malik's charioteer. The group is depicted as fanatical, disorganized, and barbaric, with villainous motives. To this, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, ADC, issued a strong statement condemning the film, saying, "True Lies is blatantly racist and promotes a deeply offensive caricature of Arabs. It perpetuates the image of the Arab as a terrorist and nothing more." Critics pointed out that the film did not feature a single positive or balanced representation of an Arab or Muslim character, and that it played into the post-Gulf War fear narrative that many 90s Hollywood films were leaning into. As if to worsen the situation, the movie took on a comedic tone, which director James maintained was intended to portray the villains as cartoonish and not meant to be taken as a political commentary. He also maintained that the focus was more on the absurdity of domestic double lives than on foreign threats. However, this did little to quell their disdain for the movie. Years later, both Cameron and Arnold Schwarzenegger acknowledged the backlash, but stopped issuing apologies. Cameron would explain that True Lies was a product of its time, and that he would like to handle that aspect differently today. Charlton Heston's eye patch was a nod to a real CIA legend. In True Lies, Charlton Heston played the role of Spencer Trilby, the no-nonsense head of the fictitious spy agency Omega Sector. His performance, although brief, is commanding, cold-blooded, and grizzled, especially with a mysterious past hinted at by his signature eye patch look. Here is one thing most people do not know. The eye patch was not just for flair. It was a deliberate homage to a real-life CIA icon, William Colby, who was a former director of Central Intelligence, and more specifically to Richard Helms, another top CIA figure whose look and demeanor reportedly inspired the character. According to director James Cameron, he and his production team wanted Heston's character to feel like a relic of Cold War espionage, the kind of man who operates in the shadows when spy work is brutal and deeply personal. The eye patch, although Heston didn't medically need it, was added as a symbolic nod to old-school intelligence legends, many of whom suffered injuries during covert operations. According to him, we needed someone who brought weight and authority. Heston was that guy. The eye patch was just the finishing touch. It was a visual cue that said, "This guy has seen some stuff." It worked perfectly because even though Heston's cameo was short, it was unforgettable, especially to fans of spy fiction. Jamie Lee Curtis's stunt double almost died on set. One of the moments that had audiences glued to their screens was when Helen Tasker, played by Jamie Lee Curtis, is pulled from a speeding limousine just seconds before it plunges into the ocean. The entire chase sequence is a dazzling showcase of practical stunts and nearly ended in a real tragedy. While Curtis performed several of her stunts in True Lies, including the striptease scene and the rooftop escape, it was stuntwoman Angela Merrill who filled in for the more dangerous moments. Unfortunately, during the limousine sequence, things went dangerously off script. Merrill was suspended from a helicopter as it hovered above the 7-mile bridge in the Florida Keys, a scene designed to recreate where Helen is yanked from the limousine just as it crashed. During one take, however, a sudden shift in the helicopter's position sent her swinging at a terrifying angle. For a few seconds, she was hanging nearly sideways over the open ocean, unable to straighten up. In several interviews, Merrill has been quoted as saying, "I thought I was going to die. I couldn't see where the bridge was anymore." She had, however, managed to hold on and recover mid-air due to her years of experience, and the scene was completed without injury. However, one thing remains certain, that it was one of the closest encounters with death in the movie, even though it was packed with real-life danger. Even Jamie Lee Curtis has publicly praised the stunt team for their incredible work, stating that, without Merrill, many of the most iconic scenes wouldn't have been possible. Ironically, the intensity of that one scene led many audiences to assume it was just CGI, when in reality it was old-school stunt work with a skilled performer who had a close shave with death. Real Marines helped film the jet scene. Remember that unforgettable moment when Harry Tasker hovers above a Miami skyscraper in a Harrier jet, aiming to rescue his kidnapped daughter in the final act of True Lies? Members of the audience assumed it was all visual effects. However, much of it involved real U.S. Marine Corps Harrier jets and was piloted by actual military personnel. The US government also charged the production just over $100,000 to use them. Cameron hadn't wanted to use CGI stimulations as he craved authenticity in the movie. He then contacted the Department of Defense, and under strict conditions, he was granted access to 3 AV-8B Harrier jump jets and their Marine pilots. The conditions include the fee of a total of $100,736, which, when broken down, would be at the rate of $2,410 per hour. The pilots were also under military supervision and were required to operate strictly by military protocol. Any risky or cinematic maneuvers were handled with practical effects, models, and a full-scale replica of the Harrier cockpit mounted on a crane. These cutting-edge aircraft, capable of vertical takeoff and landing, were flown during several sequences, mostly for aerial and establishing shots. They were advanced, highly valuable, and rarely used in Hollywood due to concerns about national security. Also, the movie's portrayal of the Marines had to be respectful. Any scenes featuring dangerous combat actions such as missile launches or rooftop battles were shot using scale models, rigs, or green screens. Schwarzenegger performed his scenes in that replica, surrounded by green screens for maximum safety. The production even built a full-scale replica of the Harrier cockpit mounted on a crane to simulate its in-flight scenes. At the time, it wasn't the first movie to feature a military aircraft. However, True Lies was one of the last major productions to use real combat jets in urban set action scenes. However, today, due to tighter restrictions and post-9/11 sensitivities, this kind of cooperation is almost unheard of in fictional scenarios involving terrorism and urban warfare. The bridge explosion was 100% real, and it cost a fortune. As a film packed with lots of stunts, few moments remain as unforgettable as the climactic chase across the overseas highway, where the terrorists are pursued on a causeway before the bridge is blown into tiny bits. One would have thought that the explosion was a Hollywood trick. Here is the fact that the explosion in True Lies was 100% real. Cameron had not wanted CGI shortcuts, as he wanted the audience to feel the scale and danger. The producers of the movie struck a deal with the Florida Department of Transportation to film on the old 7-Mile Bridge, a retired section of the iconic overseas highway in the Florida Keys. With full cooperation from local authorities and military coordination, a portion of the bridge was rigged with real explosives. The logistics were monumental. Multiple helicopters were used to film aerial coverage. Explosive charges were precisely calculated and positioned to minimize damage to the surrounding environment. The stunt required military-grade safety planning and precise timing to capture it in one take. Crews rehearsed for weeks, knowing that there would be no second chance. Moreover, it cost the producers a whopping $25 million, which was a quarter of the film's record-breaking $100 million budget. This left no room for mistakes, as that would have been a financial disaster. Therefore, the gamble paid off. The sequence remains one of the most convincing large-scale explosions ever committed to film, largely because it wasn't simulated. For support, the U.S. Army provided equipment and support for the sequence, including tanks and Humvees, in exchange for the promotional value and technical accuracy the film offered. It was one of the few times in the 1990s that the military helped with a major fictional film involving counter-terrorism. The bridge explosion was not fictional, it was real. Its impact was felt. It was a turning point in filmmaking. With its actions long before digital effects came to play, Cameron proved that when real stunts were correctly executed, it left a lasting impression. Tom Arnold was a last-minute gamble and nearly did not make it in. By the early 1990s, Tom Arnold was more of a tabloid headline than a box office character. His messy, highly publicized divorce from Roseanne Barr left him with a really bad reputation. This reputation preceded him and made him the last person 20th Century Fox wanted in a major studio tentpole. Even Tom Arnold had not expected to get a role in the movie. He went to the audition mainly because he wanted a chance to meet Cameron. However, during his tryout, he read opposite Schwarzenegger and spontaneously remarked, "He's not that big, I think I can take him." This drew Cameron in. He immediately noticed the natural chemistry between the two actors and the sharp contrast between Arnold's nervous energy and Schwarzenegger's unmistakable cool. This led to a battle between the studio, which didn't want Arnold, and James Cameron, who had a different vision. In James Cameron: An Oral History, Arnold shared how the director fought tooth and nail to cast him as Harry Tasker's wisecracking partner, Albert Gibson. The studio was unimpressed and was having none of it. Arnold states, "He went in there and said, 'We found the third guy after Arnold and Jamie Lee. It's Tom Arnold.'" He also recalled the studio's response to be, "That's horrible news." They believed Arnold hadn't earned the spot and feared that his off-screen drama would overshadow the film. Cameron was having a good time. His resolve in place, his response was, "No, I don't read the tabloids, but I wrote this, and he is the guy." When the executives still refused, Cameron issued an ultimatum. If Arnold were not going to be cast, he would take the film to Paramount Studios. That threat did it for him as Fox backed down, and Arnold got the role that would restructure his entire career. Audiences agreed that Arnold's performance not only provided comic relief, but also gave True Lies an emotional core for a relatable counterbalance to the film's larger-than-life spy antics. Whenever Arnold discussed it, he made it out that Cameron did the best thing anyone has ever done for him. He was a casting risk that paid off. This is because, contrary to studio opinions, very few people were focused more on his divorce than on the fact that he truly brought his character to life. He became one of the film's greatest assets. Jamie Lee Curtis did her own striptease and wore her lingerie. This is one of the most talked about yet misunderstood scenes in True Lies. The striptease is even more memorable as Jamie Lee Curtis did the entire striptease herself, even down to the lingerie. This was the scene where Helen was tasked with seducing Henry. Curtis not only danced with no body double, but she also brought her wardrobe of bras and panties. That is, the bra and panties she wore were her own and not from the costume department. It was a deeply personal performance that required strength and creativity. One might assume that this was the reason she brought her lingerie, so that she could feel more confident. For years, fans believed that the scene was heavily choreographed, and that the moment she slips and falls was an accident. Cameron decided to leave. That is a half-baked truth, as Curtis and Cameron rehearsed the scene extensively. Also, the fall was planned, not spontaneous. They came up with it during rehearsals, knowing it would add humor and vulnerability to what was otherwise a tense moment. The one in the dark was Schwarzenegger, and a close look at that scene again would expose you to the surprise in his eyes. He briefly sat up, almost about to break character, before eventually relaxing once more. They tried a second take, but the reaction did not look as authentic as the first, so they decided to use the original. Still, the dance itself was not choreographed at all. Years later, when Curtis was interviewed on the People in the 90s podcast, she explained, "The thing that nobody knows, there was no rehearsal. There was no choreographer. Jim Cameron said to me, 'What do you want to dance to?' To this, she picked John Hyatt's song, 'Alone in the Dark,' simply because she liked its funky rhythm. That's what they played on the set while Curtis freestyled the entire routine. The result? Explosive as it was, a raw, uncomfortable, but empowering sequence that was made iconic not by perfection, but honesty. It was the first movie to cost $1 million in production. In 1994, True Lies became a topic for discussion. It also made Hollywood's history, not just on screen, but on the balance sheet. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, it was the first ever film to have a production budget that officially exceeded $100 million. At the time, no one had invested as much into movies, not even the blockbuster standard ones. James Cameron, who had already earned a reputation for pushing limits, especially with his movies The Abyss and Terminator 2, was given near total creative control. However, this time he took it even further. He raised the bar for movie production with fighter jets, high-speed chases, real bridge explosions, and extensive on-location shoots across the US and Florida Keys. The budget also had room for complex stunt coronation, elaborate set pieces, and, as of them, cutting-edge visual effects. 20th Century Fox studio executives were initially hesitant to approve the budget. For one, a 9-figure budget was unheard of, especially for a movie that was not part of an existing franchise. Cameron's track record, alongside Arnold Schwarzenegger's unmatched star power at the time, convinced them to take that leap of faith. Cameron did not waste $1. One of the most expensive sequences, which involved destroying part of the overseas highway bridge during the movie's climax, cost an estimated $25 million due to the coordination with state and federal agencies and the use of real explosives. This, in addition to the military hardware, massive sets, and hundreds of crew members, quickly increased the costs. It would go on to earn over $378 million worldwide, proving that Fox executives were not wrong to have taken a chance with it. The movie's unprecedented price tag did more than just break the record. It also set a new benchmark. It changed the industry's perception of what an action comedy could cost, setting the stage for the modern era of big-budgeted blockbusters. That being said, critics in Hollywood saw the movie as reckless, but now it is a turning point in the movie industry. It would also always be remembered as the first movie to break the $100 million barrier. The movie was a remake of the French comedy La Totale. While the movie's originality blew most people away, very few people realized that it was a remake of a French comedy titled La Totale. The movie La Totale had earlier been directed by Claude Zidi in 1991. The original movie was also centered on a man who, at first glance, seemed ordinary. He, however, was leading a double life as a government spy who hid his secret from his wife until finally chaos unfolded and he came into the limelight. Upon discovering this movie, James Cameron was immediately drawn to the core idea. This idea had not been explored in the movie world. He then sought to make a movie that fused domestic life with international espionage. It, however, differed from the French version, as it was a more Hollywood-style depiction with exciting scenes and more emotionally charged moments. True Lies was also more action-packed, despite it being a comedy. The similarities are not just limited to its central idea. It goes beyond that to include character similarities. For example, the character named Simon. He was the sleazy used car salesman who pretended to be a spy to seduce the protagonist's wife. That role was played by Michael Bougena in La Totale. Cameron did not just translate La Totale, he also acquired the movie rights and used it as a blueprint for his movie. He then completely changed the structure, tone, and pacing. He originally hired a team of writers to help him develop the movie's jokes. However, after being mostly unsatisfied with their work, he decided to let them go and try his hand at comedy. He rewrote the script from scratch, keeping only 2 jokes that the team of writers had come up with. One of those jokes includes Arnold Schwarzenegger's famous "You're fired" line. In True Lies, Cameron preserved the character and recreated him for his version through actor Bill Paxton, whose delivery of the character was top-notch. This character delivery can easily be passed as one of the most memorable comic performances in the movie. There, however, were some differences incorporated into the movie. For example, the bad guys are determined to blow up a French football stadium in La Totale. Cameron's version, True Lies, however, was focused on bombing downtown Miami. Also, La Totale played for 1 hour and 40 minutes in total, with a modest tone. True Lies, on the other hand, ran for 2 hours and 21 minutes, making it an even longer version than La Totale. In terms of recognition, La Totale is still largely unknown outside of France, but it remains the blueprint for one of Hollywood's biggest movies of the 90s. True Lies, on the other hand, is recognized globally and also sets the tone for family and secret investigation, especially in the world of comedy. What is your take on these 20 weird facts? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, do not forget to like, share, and subscribe for more weird facts about your favorite movies. Thanks for watching.